Imagine waking up one day and realizing you no longer own your own life. Someone else decides when you wake, what you eat, and even if you have the right to breathe. For nearly 10,000 years, this was the brutal reality for millions across every continent, from Sumeria to the Viking lands. Yet, for 95% of human history, slavery didn't even exist. Welcome back to MixFey. Today we're diving deep into the dark evolution of human bondage. We'll explore how we went from egalitarian hunter-gatherers to a world where humans became commodities. Why did this happen? Was it inevitable or was it a choice? Let's unpack the chilling history of how humanity invented the ultimate form of exploitation and why it still haunts us today in the modern era. Our journey starts with a surprising fact: mobility is the absolute enemy of slavery. In early hunter-gatherer societies, groups were small, and equality was a survival strategy. Anthropologists like Richard Lee noted that for groups like the Jahwansi, private property was non-existent because you couldn't carry it while moving. Here at MixFey, we look at the logistics. It's impossible to enslave someone who can simply vanish into the forest at night and find their own food miles away. Slavery requires two things early humans lacked: a massive surplus of resources to hoard and a mechanism of force, like walls or weapons. Without these, the cost of controlling another person was simply too high. Slavery wasn't an accident. It was a structural shift that required settled life to truly take root. Many think farming was the only trigger, but the Pacific Northwest tells a different story. Tribes like the Haida and Tlingit built complex slave systems without ever planting a single seed. Their secret? An insane abundance of salmon and sea mammals. This natural surplus allowed them to stay in one place and build strict social hierarchies. Research by Leland Donald shows that up to 35% of their population were slaves, used as currency or even sacrificed in rituals. This proves that whenever there's a surplus, whether from a farm or a river, the temptation to exploit others arises. However, as David Graeber points out, some neighboring tribes consciously rejected slavery, proving that oppression is always a cultural choice, not an evolutionary necessity. When humans finally settled in the Fertile Crescent 10,000 years ago, grain changed everything. Unlike tubers that hide underground, wheat and barley grow predictably and are easy to count, store, and tax. Political scientist James C. Scott calls grain the state crop because it allowed elites to hoard wealth and power. This surplus birthed the first organized slave systems. Interestingly, early farmers were actually less healthy than their ancestors, showing signs of malnutrition and stunted growth. People didn't flock to these early cities for a better life. Often, they were forced into them. Early city walls weren't just to keep enemies out. They were built to keep the labor force in, essentially turning the first civilizations into giant open-air prisons. Writing itself actually began as a tool for slavery. The oldest records in Uruk, Sumeria, from 3200 BCE include lists of slaves categorized like livestock. In Sumerian, the word for slave literally meant man or woman from a foreign land. This highlights the start of othering, targeting those with different languages or gods. In Mesopotamia, slavery was a bureaucratic machine. The Code of Hammurabi treated slaves as property. Injuring one was merely a property damage fee paid to the owner. But the most common path to chains wasn't war, it was debt. If a harvest failed, farmers pawned their children to pay back grain. This system became so heavy that kings often had to issue mass debt forgiveness just to keep the economy from collapsing under its own greed. We've all seen the movies showing slaves building the Great Pyramids, but archaeology says otherwise. Discoveries by Zahi Hawass and Mark Lenner in the 90s revealed worker villages with bakeries, breweries, and high-quality beef remains. These weren't the rations of abused slaves, they were the perks of respected, organized laborers who were even buried with honors. While slavery did exist in Egypt for domestic work and war captives, the great monuments were built by free citizens as a form of national service. This debunked myth reminds us that while ancient states were coercive, they also relied on complex social contracts. The real horror was happening elsewhere, like in Shang Dynasty China, where thousands were held in pens for years, only to be sacrificed in mass rituals to appease the gods. In ancient Greece, the supposed cradle of democracy, the irony was thick enough to choke on. Philosophy, art, and voting rights were all powered by a massive underbelly of forced labor. Aristotle even tried to justify it, calling slaves living tools. In the silver mines of Lorient, over 100,000 slaves worked in what modern archaeologists describe as an industrial hell, cramped, airless tunnels where men worked until they dropped dead. This silver funded the Athenian Midi and their golden age. Meanwhile, in Sparta, the state declared war on its own slave population, the Helots, every year. This Cryptia ritual allowed young elites to murder any slave they saw to keep the population in a state of constant terror and prevent rebellion. Rome took slavery to an industrial scale never seen before. At its peak, 1/3 of Italy's population was enslaved, working on massive plantations called latifundia. This extreme dependence led to the famous revolt of Spartacus, which almost brought the Republic to its knees. The Roman response was terrifying. 6,000 rebels were crucified along the Appian Way, their bodies left to rot for 125 miles as a visual warning. Archaeology in Pompeii reveals the hidden misery behind the marble. Cramped bakeries where slaves and animals were locked together in windowless rooms to grind grain. In Roman law, a slave had no right to their own body. They were instrumentum vocale, or tools that happened to have a voice. Further north, the Vikings had their own dark system. They called their slaves thralls, a word that implies being enthralled or bound. Vikings raided across Europe specifically to capture humans for international trade hubs like Dublin. Isotopic analysis of Viking graves shows that thralls ate significantly worse food, mostly rotting fish, compared to their masters. The most chilling account comes from the Arab diplomat Ibn Fadlan, who witnessed a Viking funeral where a young slave girl was ritually drugged and executed to accompany her master to the afterlife. To the Vikings, a thrall was just another piece of luggage for the journey to Valhalla, showing how deeply dehumanization can be woven into a culture's spiritual fabric. There's a strange paradox between technology and slavery. We often think machines free us, but history shows they often do the opposite. The invention of iron made it cheaper to mass-produce chains and shackles. The development of ocean-faring ships in the 15th century didn't just open trade, it enabled the transatlantic slave trade, turning human trafficking into a global industry. Technology is never neutral. In the hands of a greedy system, it just makes exploitation more efficient. A prime example is the cotton gin. Invented to make cleaning cotton easier, it actually made cotton so profitable that it caused the slave population in the American South to explode by 70% in just 20 years to meet the new demand. We often forget that slaves were often the most skilled people in the room. In the American South, West African captives were targeted specifically for their ancestral knowledge of rice cultivation and irrigation, skills European planters didn't have. Others were expert blacksmiths and chemists. In the indigo industry, the complex process of fermenting leaves into blue dye required precise chemical calculations that European owners couldn't master, so they relied entirely on the technical brilliance of the people they kept in chains. It's a bitter irony. The very civilizations that looked down on slaves as uneducated were actually built on the sophisticated scientific and engineering expertise of those they oppressed. How does the human brain allow this? Neuroscience gives us a scary answer. In 2006, Princeton researchers found that when people look at groups they consider low status, the area of the brain responsible for empathy, the medial prefrontal cortex, actually shuts down. Instead, the areas for disgust light up, as if looking at a piece of trash. This moral disengagement is what made the transatlantic trade possible, where 12.5 million Africans were shipped across the ocean like cargo. While most focus on the US, the vast majority actually went to Brazil and the Caribbean to work in the sugar industry. The economic gap between Africa and the West today is still largely shaped by this massive theft of human potential and life. Slavery isn't a one-race issue, it's a universal human tragedy. The Arab slave trade lasted over 1,300 years, moving up to 18 million people across the Sahara and Indian Ocean. Barbary pirates enslaved over 1 million Europeans, and even the word slave comes from Slav, because so many Eastern Europeans were trafficked in the Middle Ages. History shows that whenever three conditions meet, resource surplus, a hierarchy of force, and the psychological trick of dehumanization, slavery emerges. Whether it's the 10,000-year-old grain pits or modern supply chains, the blueprint for exploitation remains the same. If we lose any one of those three pillars, the system collapses. The question is, which pillar are we willing to pull down today? The most tragic part? Slavery isn't just history. The International Labor Organization reports that 50 million people are living in modern slavery right now, more than at any point in human history. It looks different today. Instead of iron chains, it's debt bondage, confiscated passports, and human trafficking in factories and homes. The neurological tricks we use to look away are the same ones used 10,000 years ago. Understanding this history is the only way to recognize the chains around us today. If this journey moved you, hit that like button and share this video to raise awareness. Subscribe to MixFey for more deep dives into the truths that define us. What can we do to end this cycle? Let's talk in the comments. Thanks for watching MixFey, and I'll see you in the next one.